19-year-old.
Modernism was
very glad to be in Los Angeles right now as an art maker, as an artist.
With your practice, when I look at these early influences with the album covers, there is we talked before about the idea of synesthesia, which is the idea of, almost hearing sound, and, someone like Kandinsky with that. Tell me about the relationship now in your practice between music and...
Okay, well it began as, and then this is how, it's funny, I would think back on how it wasn't till later, I was studying abstraction, I was interested in how abstract painting is put together, the concepts and theories behind that, and I was trying to study and understand it. And so it wasn't until after I'd done it that I realized, oh wait a minute, this is my album covers. It's like, I don't see a difference. I'm sort of interested in this, there's a pop, sensibility that and a commercial side that I'm equally interested in. And so when the two came together and I began to use the system of music and translate, the first time was a guitar solo by Jimi Hendrix, and it was, I translated it into a set of colors and made a stripe painting out of it. And then I began to read music more, and so I'm interested in it as a theory of compositional harmony, and doing it originally was an idea to just break the habits I'd already formed as a painter. Because you sort of do these things and you get to do what somehow there's just habits form, and they're all by internalized conventions and things that you might not even be that aware of. So I couldn't do work that had a pretense of no preconceived or internalized conventions when I make a mark or compose something. So I always really need a plan. I need something that is kind of, okay, we can go with this. And then in the painting, the act of doing it, I can find freedom. There's a structure set up where color is, for me, something that, and I think overall something that typically hard to define in terms of language. So that's what interests me.
I was going to say, because there is your approach to how you translate music is very systematic, isn't it? It's almost scientific.
It seems it, but it's not really in practice. It seems it in theory, and I think that's what a lot of people they wonder. But in practice, it's a lot looser.
Right.
And I spend a lot of time. It's like for me, there's a correlation between making music, making pop music, the pop song, and some kind of correlation with the brevity of a kind of experience of painting itself. That there's the correlation more so than there's no scientific attempt to capture music or convey an emotion similar to the song or different to the song. To me, it's just information, and it's organized information in a way that I've sort of stuck with, because it's worked for me, and I get to listen to the records I like and make something out of the sound or the theory using the sheet music as a sketch.
And do you play an instrument as well?
No, I'm like I'm useless. Got a guitar, but it's like there's, you see actors try to be painters, musicians try to be painters. They're terrible. I'm a terrible musician. So it's one of those things. There's like there's a romantic notion to the other that you kind of want to. How can I get some of that? How can I do that? And so part of it is desire too. It's desire, and I think if there wasn't, it's funny, I could be doing something based on The Damned, but really at the root of it is still a love of the subject. In both cases, in both the music and the painting, I find, someone can't come along and ask me to do a piece of music I wouldn't be interested in.
Yeah.
Because if I didn't love it, I'm just not motivated. So it has to do with love as well, which, again, the subject of most pop songs.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to me, that's where I saw, although this is a high art, really it comes down to that, and it's simple. It can be as simple as a pop song.
Yeah.
So it's, and really I like, why attach more importance to it than that?
Yeah.
From a practice standpoint, from a museum director standpoint, that doesn't work, or a gallery dealer or whatever. But from a practice, it's very simple. It's a marriage of all things. So I got an education from studying fine art and abstraction, but I also have a love of the pop and don't make any distinction between the love. So
yeah, I mean, because it is interesting that you worked for a few years in the very commercial kind of, part of visual culture with working for the Simpsons.
Yeah. No, it's been great because I've now had two careers. I had a 12-year commercial art career, and now I'm at 13 years into a fine art career. So to have both that's been perfect. That works out perfect for me because I just don't have. I'm just glad to be able to do both. And in the last couple of years, started to make public works that just came along by opportunity. The sculpture at the Smith Center, which is, Vegas has been doing better and growing more in terms of what's going on here culturally. And so last year they opened this Center for the Performing Arts, the Smith Center, and they asked me to do a work for the park, and that's my first public work. It came to fruition while I'm still working on another one for a federal commission for a building in Portland, Oregon. But public works, again, it's been a new investigation into materials and different things, and I think, to go back to your original question in a way, modernism feeds this throughout. Or it's just there as a subtext. Not that I'm doing anything specific or thinking about it, or my work is related or directed to it in any way. But the thread is there. I look back and to riff off of older painters. To me, there's an element of there being nothing new. So, and Barney Bubbles, used that language, and so that's the place I'm coming from. So I can do both and not draw distinctions and create conceptual classes.
And is the Smith Center work, is that do you often do commissions like?
I often do commissions in painting. They come up. That's the first of a three-dimensional public work.
Yeah.
And again, that was again another good exercise for me in doing something that broke my habits. To do something in terms of public work means you do something with a committee, with groups of people, and you work in collaboration with a large group of people to make it, to install it. And you make something large and monumental outside, and then you come back to your studio, and the canvas looks very different, and it's nice and quiet. So it's different. Is there
a element of compromise working on public works?
I think there's an element of compromise in every work if you work and sell your work in a gallery system, because there's always the compromise of time. If you can manage to not compromise your time, get every ounce of every minute you ever wanted to spend on a painting, that's great. But I also think there's a lot of things that are done with a deadline in mind, and so that's the same that's similar to work in public works. I don't think it's more collaboration. And for me, I had to be willing to listen to somebody else, and it's part, what are they going to need and what's going to fit. And in the case of the Smith Center, I mean, there's a piece, I picked an early 20th century composition, Aaron Copland, a piece of classical American music, something I would never have thought of using. But I had picked it to make a base of painting on. And it worked for this outdoor sculpture too. But there again, it was something that made me break these habits. So I got to do something completely different. You've got to be open to do that. I could have squeezed something in there that, I could do my thing completely, but if it just wouldn't have fit as well as this idea did.
And why the choice of fanfare for the common man? It's very anthemic. It's a piece of classical music, essentially, isn't it? It's a very anthemic piece of music.
Well, what they've built there, if you see it, is they had all kinds of possibilities for an architectural style. And they were building this project, and they probably looked at 36 architectural proposals. And what they selected was one based on a relationship to the Hoover Dam, which is a work of the WPA era and Roosevelt, and the building of the Hoover Dam is one of the big engineering wonders of the world. Has this deco style to it, and they built the building in sort of homage to that, in relation to that, and in order to, I think, perhaps create a greater sense of Vegas being a place of history.
And Hoover Dam is actually fairly close, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And so the workers would come back down to Vegas, they more near Boulder City, out that way when they worked there, and maybe come down to Vegas when, on breaks, when it was, where we are now is in the 16 blocks, the original of downtown. And Vegas has this, that reputation, but it was an old Wild West city. And so they picked that for a building, that style, this deco style, which to me, I just sort of thought about the era, and originally, like I said, it was a painting for within it. So since the work was originally going to go in there, I picked that piece of music just because it just is appropriate for the context. So it's all about context.
Yeah.
If it didn't, it just wouldn't work to do something and it's a classical opera house is the way it's structured. So it just wouldn't have worked to do, Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah. Has that work then changed the way you work within the studio?
I think that's a time will tell question. I think I don't think I ever really feel completely conscious of what these things are, how they come about, or how they influence until later. This is new work that I'm working on back here, and I could pull it up, but nearly 20 years ago, I pulled out a record from nearly 20 years ago, and it was an Oasis single. And it's got just a photograph of equipment. The drum kit has a Union Jack swirling into the center of it, into a hole. And I'm going, oh, how was that? That was in my subconscious. And it just like, encountering a Kandinsky in a museum and going, okay, that was Barney Bubbles. That was when I was a kid. They always sort of fall into place later. So, no, I think the most important thing really is just to be in the studio and just carrying on and making things, and stuff occurs to you and you do it, and later you might go, oh, I know, okay, and then it's what is it? It's a practice, or as Bridget wrote, an investigation, or I guess that's what it is, just to do work and pursue this.
To what extent is your practice, let me put this into a way, to what extent is practice part of your thinking process?
You mean in terms of that conceptually what drives what I actually do, you mean? or
I think I mean in
the
terms of-
activity.
Yeah, when you're actually engaging in the practice of creating the works.
Yeah.
I mean, they are very. When I look at the work behind you, for instance, there's a mechanical element to that. It has to be very planned out.
Right.
But the process of doing that.
Yeah.
How does that affect then the idea of what you're working on?
Funny enough, what happens is that my focus is color, and it's within color that I find a sort of, a slippery area in terms of defining it, that I can then work and have some freedom. And so I need the structure, or I'll be all over the place. And I like that I don't think I could even make a mark and believe in myself that this was not in some way, predetermined somewhat by at least a subconsciously internalized convention. And I probably went through a school system which came out of, I went to secondary modern. What's that mean does that mean somewhat modernist? I don't know. I don't know how our educational structure came about that I went through in school.
Yeah.
But to me, there has to be something that stopped me going all over the place. I can't believe in, I'm just a painter in and of myself, and the mark I make is completely uninfluenced, and so I need something. And then within the colours and the working with it, I find a lot of freedom, and it's a lot more intuitive than people realise. So I'm doing it intuitively. There is some plan there, but there's not a strict in any one of these paintings based on a composition.
Yeah.
There's not middle C is not always going to be a medium value red. But if you go back over the history of artists and theorists that have made ideas about, thought about and tried to correlate sound and vision, they're nearly always, I actually haven't seen another system that isn't, it attempts to define it, and most often you'd see middle red is middle C.
Yeah.
And so on and so forth. Russian composers, there was a lot of this around the beginning of the 20th century. So there is no doubt in my mind that the continuum that I'm on, and a lot of what I reference, is rooted in modernism that came out of it.
Yeah.
But I think the approach for me that works best is when I don't think I think like Barney Bubbles did about theory, and I guess I distrust my knowledge to the extent that I've got to have a sense of humour about it and take it lightly and just get on with it. So I can't do it without I can't take myself too seriously when I do this, although I've got a serious interest in abstraction.
Yeah, and I think maybe that maybe does come from the more commercial art sort of background is well that you have,
Yeah, and I think I grew up in a time when commercial art had been made high art by Andy Warhol, and so it's the post-Warholian act. I mean, that's the influence there that and the 60s and everything else that made commercial art and the lowbrow high art and just took away the distinctions. So I grew up with that different, or blurring of distinctions, whatever it is, and so I didn't mind, blending the two.